Live online events are a great way to grow your email list with a super engaged audience. But what's the best way to do them? I'm Pamela Wilson, and I coach people to build profitable businesses. Subscribe to my channel so you can build your online revenue. To make the most out of live events like webinars and workshops, I took the concept one step further. I came up with the term live content events because delivering valuable content makes your event worth attending. And when you provide valuable, useful information to your event attendees, you build trust and authority, and your prospective customers know what to expect when they buy from you. Speaking of which, have you gotten my free guide to generating large-scale revenue with a small-scale audience yet? It's called Revenue Revolution, and you can find it at pamelawilson.com/revenue. Okay, let's talk about how you can use free live content events to grow your email list and your revenue. Content events have worked really well for me over the years, and I wanted other people to be able to take advantage of them. So what is a content event? Well, a content event is a way to bring your content, your authoritative content, to life. And because these events are live, they are a fantastic way for your audience to get to know you and for you to get to know them. The other way to understand content events is what they are not. So content events are not blog posts. They are not podcasts or newsletters or infographics or social media posts or email newsletters. What they are live events. So they are live events that happen on a specific date, and they are events that you send out an invitation to people so that they will attend them. You also gather RSVPs for this event, and this is the part of the content event that helps you to grow your email list. And then people make a note that there is an event happening on a certain date and at a certain time so that they can attend the event. And then after the event is over, you offer some kind of replay of the event. You follow up with people who registered and you deliver some kind of replay to them. So those are the characteristics of a content event. Probably the most important aspect is that it is delivered live. So you're giving your audience a way to interact with you and with each other live. Personally, I really like to make content events recurring as well. And recurring means that they happen on a specific date and time every so often, every month, every week, something like that. What I like about making them recurring is that your audience then begins to know that they can count on you to show up consistently the same way over time. So content events do build engaged audiences, and there are a few reasons for this. One of the big ones is just that content events are live events. But the other thing is that they're real. And I'm putting this in quotation marks, but by real, I mean they're not completely polished. They are real and they're happening in real time. And that means that sometimes they're imperfect. Sometimes mistakes are made and things go sideways. But the secret, and the reason I have an asterisk on the word imperfect, is that this is what makes content events really awesome. This is actually the place where the human connection happens. So what I want to encourage you to think about, especially if the idea of doing a live content event feels very daunting, is that in those moments of imperfection, that's actually where the human connection happens. No one expects you to be a robot. No one expects to attend an event that's going to be delivered by a machine. They want to attend an event that is hosted by a real person. And I think everyone knows that real people are not perfect and they're not machines that are stamping out information completely perfectly. So if something is not perfect, if something goes sideways, I want to encourage you to just not beat yourself up, because people, you are going to seem so much more relatable if what you deliver and the way you deliver it is not perfect. It's actually, I mean, when you have mess ups, I want you to think, yes, people can see I'm real. This is a good thing. The mistakes may be delivery oriented. So it's happened to me before. For example, I always have written notes printed out. And one time I printed it on two sides of the paper. So I had like a front and back side. And in all the excitement of delivering my information, I just kind of lost my place. I couldn't tell which page or which side I was on, and my information wasn't syncing up with my slides, and I got all discombobulated. So that kind of thing happens in delivery. I now print my outline on one side only because live and learn, right? So the other thing that can happen, and we've all seen these kinds of content events where the technology just goes sideways. The technology stops working midway, and those kinds of things happen too. Less now than they used to, but it definitely happens. I had a webinar probably 5 years ago now that just, nope, stopped working right in the middle. I had to set up a brand new webinar, send out a new invitation to all the people who had signed up for the old one, and ask them if they wouldn't mind, hopping back on at a new link. So you kind of have to be ready for anything. The imperfections can happen due to your delivery or due to technology. Anything can happen, and that's okay. That's the way it is. What I want you to think about, though, is that these content events can grow your email list and grow your email list with people who feel connected to you and engaged. So let's talk about how you can structure them and how you can set them up so that that email list growth can happen. So there are a few steps. I have them in a list form here, but then I'm going to show you in a graphic form in the next slide. But the first step is to set a date for your content event. So you decide, okay, I'm going to do this on X day at X time. So it's like throwing any kind of a get together or party where you pick a day and you pick a time. Then you want to set up some kind of a landing page. And that is going to be a page where you advertise the event. It doesn't have to be super long. The idea is that these events are likely free, so you don't have to oversell them, but give people the basic points and the basic reasons for showing up and what they'll learn, and then give them a place to register. So you'll have some kind of form embedded where they will register for the event, and that registration will put them on your email list. So you'll have a way to stay in touch with them. Then you're going to send login information or a link to show up only to the people who actually register for the event. And then the replay also only goes to registrants. So that is how you can use these kinds of events to grow your list. So let's break this down and look at what this looks like. So first of all, set a date for the content event. It's a good idea to kind of know where your audience is mostly located so that you can find a day and time that will work for most of them. Understand your audience and what their schedules are like and what part of the world they're in. You can also poll them and ask and try to find out, especially if it's going to be a recurring event. I think about my energy levels as well. So I tend to have more energy earlier in the day. As it gets toward the end of the day, I'm just kind of worn out and it's a little bit harder to be energetic on presentations. So that's something else to consider. When is your audience available and when is your energy going to be the best in terms of giving a really energetic presentation? Then you'll create your registration landing page. And the idea behind this is that you actually want to send them to a page on your site. And this is the link you're going to advertise. So you're not advertising like the login link for the event. You're advertising the landing page where they will register, because this will give you a way to capture their email addresses. So when you're sharing it on social media or in your email marketing, what you're sharing is a link to the landing page where they will register. Then the third step is to send the login information for the event or the link to the event only to the registrants. So this is something that will be exclusively for people who were willing to give you their email address. And then finally, finally, when you send out the replay, one way to sort of thank people for signing up is to only send the replay to people who register. That's a way to keep this kind of exclusive and to really build a community around the information. So one thing I'm thinking some of you might be wondering right around now is if you're planning to do a Facebook Live type event where they don't really have to register on webinar software, for example, you may be wondering, well, where does this fit with all of that? I feel very strongly that people should sign up and give you an email address if they're going to interact with you live on one of these content events. I feel like it's the least that they can do. So don't undersell the value of your information and your live presence by just letting anyone tune in. And that does mean, though, that you have to put this live experience behind an opt-in, as we say in the business. So you need to create a landing page with a registration so that people have to give you an email address so that they can get all the event information. Let's talk about how to structure your content. The best content events, I think, offer some kind of valuable content. That's why they're called content events. That's why I call them content events, and I don't call them parties or cocktail hours or anything like that. This is not a social event. It's an opportunity for you to deliver valuable information and for people to experience your expertise firsthand. And in order to do that, in order to make that kind of really positive impression, you need to teach in a way that people will remember the concepts that you're sharing. But I don't want this to feel daunting. I want to make it very easy. So I put together this super simple format that I want to show you. This is what I use for almost every single teaching presentation that I do. So it comes in 3 parts, and then there's I've got a graphic coming up that will show you how this breaks down, but you may have heard this before. So in the introduction, you're going to share with people what they're about to learn. So people say, tell them what you're going to tell them. Right? That's a way to think about the introduction. Then I recommend that you limit it to no more than 3 big concepts. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But in the middle section, you're basically telling them your information. This is the meat of the presentation. And then at the end, we have a summary. So you're going to tell them what you told them. And this is a way to go back and say, this is what we went over. And this is what that looks like. So you've got the introduction at the very beginning, and you're going to let them know that you've got 3 big concepts that you're going to go over. In this section, I like to also give people context. So I like to say something like, this is why this matters right now. Then we have these 3 concepts. I tend to use metaphors or some kind of visual to represent the concept to help people to remember it. I also like to break down the concept into smaller parts and show people how they go together. And I love to bring in relatable examples. That helps a lot when you're explaining these concepts. And then at the very end, you have the summary. So this is where you are going over your main concepts one more time. Oftentimes you'll have a Q&A, like an open Q&A where people can ask you questions about what you just covered and ask for clarification. So that's the overall structure. And the idea here is even if you're doing a short event where maybe you only want to talk for 10 or 12 or 15 minutes, maybe you only cover 1 concept. So maybe you don't have time to cover 3 big concepts, you only cover 1. What I want to recommend is that you still include this beginning introduction where you talk about what you're going to tell them and the context for what you're about to tell them. Maybe you only cover 1 concept, and then you have a summary where you very quickly go over what you just taught, just to reinforce it. And then you have a moment where people can ask you questions. So here's the introduction. This is what I just went over. 3 main concepts and why it matters. And then we have, when you're teaching each concept, you use metaphors or visuals, and you break it down into parts, and you share relatable examples. And then the summary is where you repeat the main concepts and you can answer questions. And again, this is what the whole thing looks like all together. And as I said, you can shrink it down and just share one concept, but I do recommend that you keep that introduction and that summary because they're almost like bookends to the presentation. They help to reinforce. All right, let's talk about how to make content events simple and repeatable, easy to repeat. So like I mentioned earlier, I recommend that you start small and that you build on your strengths. For example, if you are one of those rare creatures, because I haven't met many people like this, but if you're one of those rare creatures who feels 100% comfortable on video, then by all means do content events that are built on videos. But if you do not feel comfortable doing video, don't plan a content event, especially a first content event that relies on video. You can start with audio only. If you are comfortable showing slides, for example, but you just don't want to be on camera yourself, you can do that, which is what I'm doing here. But the most important thing is to think about how you feel comfortable and how you can get started. So whether that's audio or video or maybe just slides, or maybe you feel very comfortable presenting in person, you can rely on that. But again, just to reinforce, for it to be considered a content event, it's live, it's happening on a specific date that you invite people to. So you capture their email addresses and then they respond, they RSVP, and they make a note in their calendars. They're going to show up on a certain day at a certain time. And then you offer some kind of replay to everyone who has registered. And you follow up with people afterwards and continue to send them information. I want you to think about it more like a party invitation, and think about it like if you do plan to make it a recurring event, think about how you can create everything with the goal of reusing it. So a landing page that you like the basic structure of, that you can just edit in the future, basic copy that you can just edit in the future. Try to create everything so that it can kind of be copy pasted and applied to the next event. I also highly recommend that you document your steps so that they're very easy to repeat. This is a perfect event to hand over to an assistant to help set up. So if you're at the point in your business where you're ready to work with a VA, this is the perfect kind of task, as long as you have it all written out that you can hand over to someone else. Here's our summary. Here we are at the summary. So first of all, we talked about why content events build engaged audiences. And the big thing is that they are a way for you to present your authoritative content and to sort of bring it to life. And because they're live, they're a fantastic way for your audience to get to know you a little bit and for you to get to know them as well. There's nice engagement, nice connection. They don't have to be perfect. And sometimes it's better if they're not perfect. So the 4 steps that we talked about so that you can use these events to actually grow your email list are to set up a specific date and time, then create a landing page where you embed a form that people will fill out so that they can register for the event and you have an email address for them. And then you want to send the login or link information only to people who registered. And the replay also only goes to people who registered. This is a way for you to acknowledge that someone has given you something valuable, which is their email address, and you send information and the replay only to people who've shared that with you. Then we talked about how to structure your content. I showed you a very basic structure that I use for all of my presentations. This is a very easy way for you to structure expertise and for people to understand what you're teaching, and you know, to not sort of overdo the information that you're giving to people. So you're sharing kind of 3 big concepts. You're sharing an introduction at the beginning, putting it in context, and then you're summarizing it at the end, which is what we're doing right now. And this is that structure. So we have the bookends, what I call the bookends, which is the introduction at the beginning and the summary at the end. I recommend 3 concepts. That seems to be about as much as people can hold in their heads at any one time. But if you're doing a very short presentation, you could just do 1 concept. That's fine as well. And then we talked about in the last section, we talked about how to make content events very simple and very repeatable. And what I was saying is create the pieces that you need for that content event with an eye toward basically copy pasting and just editing for future content events. And then also try to really document everything that you do to set up the event so that eventually you can hand it over to someone and let them help you with that. That's a fantastic thing to just hand over. It's not a terribly creative job. You just need somebody who's kind of detail oriented who can put it all together for you. All right, now that you know how to set up and how to structure your live content event, you might be wondering how often to do them. Well, honestly, that's going to depend a lot on you, on what you're promoting and your audience. Personally, I enjoy offering them about once a month. It makes them feel like a special event when they happen, and that pace seems to work well for my particular audience. If you're launching or you're promoting an offer, you can bump up the frequency of your live events so that your prospective customers can learn more about your product or service and get to know you and your business better. And if you're feeling uneasy about promoting your live event, I have a video that you should watch next. It'll help you to start to love marketing, I promise. See you over there.